we want to create an environment where people feel like they can contribute from day one. And that they feel like that they can challenge us, that we're not these superior leaders that have egos. We've really tried to empower our teams and be very collaborative. And I think when you create that type of environment, number one, it's really satisfying because you feel like you're making a difference and you can contribute and you feel valued. But then also, I think people are able to give more. You just feel more motivated. It's a place you want to be and a place you want to be in.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
What if growing your business took more than just a great strategy and hitting your numbers every time? You know as a leader that those things are very important to the success of the business, the ability to get results. But one of the other things that you have to focus on as a leader is the people. Today, we look at some specific factors. Maybe you haven't thought about how they work together, but we're going to look at psychological safety and ownership. I have been preaching here to you, if you're listening to any of these episodes before, about the importance of having people feel like owners. One of the pieces in that puzzle is psychological safety. Today's interview is about how they played together, why they are necessary if you want your business to grow fast. We're talking with Joel Clark, co-founder, CEO of Kodiak Cakes. Really fast-growing company, over 500%. They were number 838 on the Inc. list, and they grew to over 100 million in the last few years. Now, we go and look back at what happened in the first beginning of that, but when all things started to change is when he started to invest into the people, leadership development, training. He mentions his brother inside here and his work in psychological safety. I bring that up because it is part of what I do, but I have a little bit broader aspect to leadership development. It's part of what I do, but I have a little bit different perspective on leadership development where psychological safety is necessary, but it plays well with the other pieces of empowerment to create ownership. So that's part of this interview today. If you haven't had a chance to check out the free training, we want to make sure that you actually get that. If you want to grow as a leader, if you want to be the founder of a company that continues to grow and escalate to the next level, get this free training. This will help you create the kind of movement you need and the team you need of A players. Just go to genehammett.com/training. You can get it absolutely for free. Just subscribe and you can get it downloaded immediately. What you will get inside that training is 3 biggest mistakes to avoid as a leader, and how to fix those if you're experiencing them right now. I've done research. You will get that research and you'll see how it works inside of organizations. Just go to genehammett.com/training. Now here's the interview with Joel. Hi, Joel. How are you?
Doing well. Good to be with you.
Excited to have you on the show to talk about what makes companies grow fast, especially the leadership and culture. You are a co-founder, CEO of Kodiak Cakes. Give us some idea of what Kodiak Cakes is.
So Kodiak Cakes is probably still mostly known as a pancake and waffle mix. And it started out as an old family recipe. And when I was 8 years old, I went around our little neighborhood in Salt Lake City, Utah, and sold homemade pancake mixes that my mom had made in brown paper lunch sacks. And we loaded up my little red wagon, and I went around the neighborhood and sold these little homemade mixes. So that was like the early roots of Kodiak Cakes. And then, years later, my older brother John, in the mid '90s, wanted to start a business and said to my mom, "Hey, I want to start a business. Do you have any ideas?" And our mom said to him, "Hey, yeah, why don't you take the pancake recipe and go make a real product out of it and start selling it?" So that's what John did, and he created the brand Kodiak Cakes, the first product, and started the business. And I helped them in selling in the very beginning, and then a couple of years later, I took over the company. It was just teeny tiny little business doing about $29,000 in total revenue, and I took it over and just kept it alive ever since.
So I looked at the numbers. You're not tiny anymore.
No, we've grown a little since then.
When you think about the business now, getting to over 100 million, what is one of the challenges you had to overcome? I know there's many, but what really was marks something you're really proud that you overcame?
I would say really, as I look back, because our journey really was a long, slow slog, and a lot of businesses are, and it's just hard to hang in there. And I think it took us 16 years, for example, to hit $1 million in revenue. So, I mean, that was just really hanging in there. I think I look back and I'm like, what, for me, probably maybe one of the biggest accomplishments was just persevering through all that, so it really was. And, you're going through that journey. And I remember kind of feeling like, man, am I just beating a dead horse? Am I chasing a dream that's never going to happen? And I think a lot of us feel that way, right? In the early days of trying to get something off the ground, and you just don't know if it's going to work, and there's so much uncertainty. And so, little by little, I was able to kind of hang in there and keep it alive. But I would set myself these like 6-month goals, and I'd be like, okay, if these things don't happen in the next 6 months, I gotta call Uncle and walk away from this thing at some point. But little by little, they would kind of keep happening, and I'd kind of hit my goals and hang in there. But I think for me, that's probably one of the biggest, probably the biggest success factor was just the fact that I was able to just hang in there and stick it out.
I've not heard many stories like this. I know that a lot of people have had some long journeys, but 16 years to $1 million, frankly, it's a lot. I'm sure that you were questioning yourself in that journey, and it was just a handful of people. But now over 100 million, 500% growth rate to put you at 838 on the Inc. list. I love this story, and coming from mother, I'm a very family oriented person. Happy to have you here on the show to talk about leadership and culture, Joel.
That's great. I appreciate that.
When you were talking to my team about this, we wanted to research the company and really kind of dig into what makes you tick. You had said something completely surprising for a very mature company, for a company that has taken a long time to get to where you are. But psychological safety. Tell us a little bit about what psychological safety is.
Yeah. So, I mean, it basically means that you create an environment where people feel psychologically safe, so that they can feel like they can challenge the norms, or they can, in a meeting, they feel like they can contribute, or in a brainstorming session where they really feel like I can say my mind, I can speak my mind, I can say something and it will be valued, and it won't be like, looked down upon, or, if you're like young in your career, or if you're a brand new employee, you might naturally feel a little bit hesitant to speak up or to say something. And what we wanted to really do is create the opposite of that. We want to create an environment where people feel like they can contribute from day one, and that they feel like that they can challenge us, that we're not these superior leaders that have egos, that we've really tried to empower our teams and be very collaborative. And I think when you create that type of environment, number one, it's really satisfying because you feel like you're making a difference and you can contribute and you feel valued. But then also, I think people are able to give more. You just feel more motivated because it's a place you want to be and a place you want to give. You want to give your best.
Hold on for a second. Did you hear Joel talk about having employees that feel like they can challenge the norms? You may think that you want an organization where people don't question you. The yes, ma'am, yes, women inside the organization, that works to a point. But what you end up having is not the kind of team that you want. You want people that have the confidence to challenge the norms. You want them to feel empowered. You want them to feel a sense of psychological safety that allows them to make those opinions, those statements, and have healthy conflict. There's a lot to this whole leadership thing. I say with a smile because it really is important for you to understand that you don't want people to just accept what's there. You want them to truly look at it and have conversations that allow you to grow as an organization. If you do that over time, you will have people who really feel a part of the work, and that will give you an extra boost of retention, loyalty, creativity, all of the things you need to drive the business further and faster. Back to Joel. How long has this been something of focus for you as a leader?
Well, I think subconsciously it's been a focus for a long, long time. For early on when we first kind of wrote down our culture, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, these types of concepts were really part of what we wanted to do. Like we talked about being empowering, we talked about being collaborative, we talked about being great to work with. Yet I didn't really know the word. I didn't know the term psychological safety until fairly recently. My older brother, Tim Clark, does some maybe similar work to what you do. He does leadership training and consulting and writes books and just a plug to your type of work really is like, honestly, I think some of the most transformational moments for me as a leader have been where I have gotten training from an expert like you. And so like, I think just that type of training has been so impactful. So we started to really learn about this word. My brother teaches a lot about this and has written a book on it. And so it just resonated like crazy with us because it was a concept or like an atmosphere that we were going for. But then to learn more that there is like an actual principle about this or a concept about it has just been awesome. So we've continued to try to learn more about it and have embraced it even more.
When you say that you grew through this leadership development, a lot of leaders, I find that they think reading a book is enough, right? Or they'll read 2 or 3 books, of course, this year. Maybe they'll read 10 or a dozen books. Why is that kind of not enough to challenge your own growth as a leader?
Yeah. No, I love the question because I've done that too. And I do, I like to read books and I learn a lot from them. And one thing that I always say is information is motivation, right? It's like the more information that I can gain, man, I start to get motivated. I might be reading a book and then I'm motivated to do this or do that. It's really motivating. But I think the hands-on training there's a couple things, but one thing that really does come to mind is like when you have an entire group of people, for example, trained. I've done both one-on-one training, which is awesome because you can have conversations and then somebody can, the trainer can really help to find blind spots that you might be missing out on. So it's deeper than just reading a book, right? So you can get challenged and then that intellectual process can be really constructive. But then also like having a group trained, what that did for some of those trainings that we've had have become really just ingrained in our culture. So for example, we had a really great training on EQ. That just turned out to be such a great training, and it became just a big part of our culture and how we interacted with each other and learning about self-awareness and that type of thing. So I think those types of things have just been very impactful for us.
Now, hold on for a second. Joel just mentioned EQ. He talked about why it's important, but he didn't actually describe what EQ was. Now, I'm going to give you the layman's terms here. So I didn't look up the definition, but emotional quotient is very much like intellectual quotient, but it's about emotions, measuring your ability to manage your emotions, understand others, and to truly grow together through this emotional world. The reality is you can't just leave your emotions at the door. Everyone's said those things before. Joel talks about it, but you have to be willing to tune into other people, tune into your own emotions, control them. You don't want to get completely emotional swings where you're completely out of control. That's the idea of having EQ. And you want to also be able to tune into other people's emotions. So it will give you a chance to lead them better. That's a layman's definition of EQ. I just wanted you to have what you need to be able to move forward. Back to the interview. Well, I want to dive into this psychological safety. What do you think is kind of the reason why leaders avoid this whole sense of focusing on psychological safety?
I think one of the reasons why it's so important is because one concept that my brother really pointed out to me when we were talking about this is he said, look, what this does, there's a real correlation between psychological safety and innovation. And I think, once I kind of understood that, it made so much sense to me because, it's like innovating is a real social activity, right? Innovation can be. So when you're having meetings where you're having brainstorming or you're trying to come up with new product development or new ideas, if you have an environment where everyone feels empowered to contribute, man, those meetings go so much better. I mean, there have been so many times where we've looked at an idea that we had and we thought, whose idea was that? And we didn't even know often, because it was a result of an awesome brainstorm meeting where people were involved and everybody was contributing. And then one idea led to another. And then we walk out of there with, a couple of really great ideas we could actually go and execute on. And so, it really does have that link to innovation, but there's also just where, you set up an environment where people want to be there and they want to give their all. That can become a very positive culture. And I really do feel like culture can be a real asset to your business. If you have a really strong, positive culture where people want to be and they want to give their best, I mean, think about that. That really is an asset. I mean, can you quantify that? I don't know how you quantify it, but you can quantify it really if you're, in results of your business, I think.
So I know that your company, just looking at the numbers at face value, have been growing faster. The first 16 years to $1 million. But now over the last 3 years, or give or take a few months, you have grown over 500%, right?
Yeah.
506, sorry. So it's because of team. I mean, do you have to really look at that? Like, the reason why we're able to get more brand awareness and the reason we're able to create, I'm assuming, new products is because of the team. Is that fair to calculate?
Yeah, absolutely. A book that I really love, and I'm sure a lot of people listening here have read, but Built to Last by Jim Collins. And they studied all these companies that had sustainable growth for a long period of time. And they kept saying, like, we want to know why. And they kept kind of early on said, you can't just come back and say it's because of the people. You can't just do that. We got to find something else. You can't just, and so as they got into the research, they kept coming back with, no, it's because of the way that it's the leadership styles in here. And the leadership style was very collaborative. It was very empowered. And they didn't, although I don't believe they used the term psychological safety in that book, I think that's what they were creating. They were creating the right environment where people felt like empowered, where they felt this extreme ownership and accountability, where they could go out and perform. And so, like, we've tried to model that. We have not had like a top-down prescriptive leadership approach at Kodiak Cakes. We have really tried to empower all of our leaders and our teams. Yet, you want to set clear expectations and clear goals and objectives so people know what they're running after. But I completely agree with you. I think having the right team and the right people with the right structure for creating the right culture and psychological safety absolutely is a direct correlation to results.
I want to go into this a little bit with you, maybe put a spotlight on it. What is counterintuitive that you have learned about creating psychological safety?
Okay, that's interesting. Counterintuitive. I think okay. Let me say it this way. There are some companies who might have a very psychologically safe environment, but maybe low accountability, right? So you may have one that's very, very psychologically safe, maybe low accountability, so therefore not very high performing, okay? But you may also have another, but you may have a very highly accountable organization with a low psychologically safe environment where people, maybe there's a bit of a fear factor going on in there. And people are like, oh man, I'm delivering on my results, but I'm afraid to challenge the norm. I'm afraid to speak up, right? And so I think what we learned was that you need both. If you can create a very psychologically safe environment, but also have really, really great accountability and ownership, then I think you really have something there. And so I think that's what I would say is that could be counterintuitive a little bit, because are the two fighting for each other? No, they're not fighting for each other. They actually complement each other very well.
Just a quick message for you. If you're listening on YouTube, I'd love for you to give us a thumbs up if you like this content, give us a comment, And make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell, because we'd love to continue to stay in touch with you about the content, about being a better leader, being more influential, strategic, and being the true CEO that your team deserves. Just remember to subscribe now. I love the fact that you talk about accountability, because it is a very important piece to leadership. I've never met a leader who said, we don't need any more accountability. They pride themselves in the level they have. But also, you mentioned in their ownership. When people feel like owners, and I would imagine that you've probably thought about this a little bit, when people have that feeling of ownership, what happens across the organization as it relates to company growth?
People love to own things, right? Like, so number one, we like to own things, just things, but that translates to the way we work. It really does, because it's so much more satisfying and rewarding to be able to have ownership in your work and to feel like you really created it, and you weren't just following the directions of somebody and just doing tasks, but you were thinking about that, and you were creating your work. And I think that's so motivating. So I think the ownership really, I think, let me say it this way. I think when we were talking about accountability as an organization, and one thing we did, by the way, is we came up with a vision for our culture, and it was to be able to have great psychological safety and great accountability. But as we were talking about it with the team, we started to say, hey, how do we wanted to find out how do people feel about accountability? Because sometimes the word accountability can come across as a pretty harsh, you got to deliver your results on time, and it kind of could sound like a harsh word. But as we defined it, it became, this is extreme ownership. We're trying to talk about owning something. So accountability becomes a very positive concept. And I think if you can deliver it that way, then if people feel empowered about the way they are being accountable, then it's so positive, and people feel like they own what they're doing.
I'm smiling at this because my thought around this is, no one really likes to be held accountable to their work, because they want to know that I can get it done no matter what. But they definitely want others to be held accountable, because our work in a collaborative environment depends on others. Your work depends on your team. I depended on you showing up here today, Joel, to get this interview.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I love the fact that you talk about that. It really can get to a place where it binds people together. Accountability is certainly not a bad thing, and you need it. Well, putting psychological safety and accountability together in this sense of ownership really is a great conversation for us. I want to give you one more chance, Joel. Is there anything else we haven't talked about that you feel like has really added to the growth of the business?
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel like the culture generally has been a big one, and the two things that we've been talking about, accountability and psychological safety, those became kind of a vision for the culture. But I think those are massive elements of how do you actually get people to want to deliver and perform. And then I think that I feel like there's one more thing I would kind of say is, just from an entrepreneurial perspective, is one thing that you really need to think about as an entrepreneur as you grow is, how are you scaling yourself? And I think that's one thing that I think I totally under anticipated. About 3.5 years ago, almost 4 years ago now, we raised some capital, and we just needed it. We needed to have some capital and some resources in the tank. We were growing really fast, and we needed some help. And so so then that was when I kind of needed to make this transition from just being a small, owning and running a small business, to becoming a CEO. And I think that's something that I under anticipated along the way, is what that transition would look like and what it would feel like. And so that became a real, stretching time for me, where I just I had to scale myself, and we needed to hire a great team, a leadership team, and start to really, bring in some outside professionals who kind of knew how to build a business. And I think that's something that leaders need to think about a little bit, is how are you scaling as a leader? And there comes a point where your business it it's going to scale, and you're going to need to hang in there right along with it. And I think getting trained and reading books and doing those types of things really have helped me to just make that transition. And I still am. I'm still trying to scale myself every day as our business continues to grow. And so, that's what I would say is just, that's what you've got to work on, that and think ahead for when your growth comes. And are you thinking ahead of that and thinking above your role, as your business grows?
Beautiful. I couldn't have said it better myself. The evolution of a leader is necessary. Too often we fall complacent. So, Joel, thanks for being here on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Love having interviews with people in the trenches that really care about their people. Do you understand and feel that he cares about the people? He wants to move the business forward. He shared with me some of the plans to get to 200 million and beyond, but he wants the people to know how much they care. The brand that he's building is more than just selling their products. It is about the people and how they are treated and all of the stuff that goes into creating a team that will be psychologically safe, but also take ownership. I love these interviews. Hopefully you'll continue to tune in time and time again. I love these interviews. I hope you continue to tune in to take your leadership to the next level. If you want to get more specific about how you're growing, I work with leaders that are in the defining moments of their own growth. One of my clients said to me once, the reason why I love working with you is because you help me get clear about the things that are only somewhat clear. And I knew how to take action. You gave me the confidence to really be the leader that I needed to be. I love that comment. I share it with you. If you want to have a conversation with me, make sure you reach out to me, gene@genehammett.com. Keep evolving as a leader. Keep pushing beyond the boundaries. Don't let the status quo pull you in and become complacent. As always, lead with courage. See you next time.